I want to acknowledge the families of Denver Smith and Leonard Brown, and I want to acknowledge everybody for being here. I want to talk quickly, and I promise not to be long, and say what happened that day. When Leonard walked out of his office, I was there, but before he walked out, I went up to see what was going on, and everything seemed orderly. And contrary to what the media has said about him being held hostage and all that stuff, that was a total lie. Because when he came out, he was answering questions from Nathaniel. And Nate was pleading with him, asking him to just make a phone call and get the students released who had been, I say, kidnapped and arrested. And Leonard agreed. He said, okay, when he got back. So he left, and I followed him. And he went down to the Board of Education, where he was presented some kind of award or something. And while he was there, someone whispered in his ear that perhaps, they whispered that students had been murdered. So I left, as he did. And I got in my car and the radio was on, and I heard about 2 students being killed. For some reason, I have a total lapse of memory of where I went after that. Did I stop along the road, or did my car take me in its own destination? But today, I still have no memory of what happened after that. All I know is I was in shock. And so I think what was happening was that we have burning in our bones a legacy of slavery, a legacy of oppression, and it's going to come out. And it's going to come out through students, most likely, in an area, in an arena where dialogue is possible among themselves. So to answer your question, what happened for me, how I got involved, was a little frail student walked into my classroom with tears in her eyes, and it was an engineering class. And she beckoned to the instructor, could she have a word? And she cried and she said, how can you be in class when so much is going on your campus that you don't know about? There's a meeting. You should come to that meeting. I wanted to usher her out of our classroom and get on with the engineering that we were talking about. And I did attend that meeting after class, and my life completely turned around. I must say also that I had come from LSU in chemical engineering because Southern didn't offer it. And I was also a radical, I guess, at Southern University because I went to school with David Duke. And I was in the Martin Luther King Action Movement, which was a counter to what David Duke was all about. And I also went to jail there on behalf of the students from Southern who were entering the building for the Board of Education. I went there too. So the enrollment into this movement was organic. I think burning in the bones of everybody. They just needed to hear. There was no Pied Piper playing a magic flute. I think they just needed the opportunity. And they say that the biggest anxiety you have is to have a story and not be able to tell it. And I think all of us have stories. A break in belonging to the human race. And Shockley did that in the 60s when he talked about the inferiority of black folk. And there are many books that you can read that really tap into what's inside of you, burning inside and wanting to be told. That's what coalesced the students at Southern University. A bullhorn out on a green lawn is what did it. And to tell the story and invite them to come forth and vent what they needed to vent. And that's what I was thinking to that.
Thank you. Our next question is going to go to Ms. Brenda Williams. Ms. Brenda, you were a student in the 1970s, but you were not so involved within the movement at the time. Did you have a different educational experience at Southern than what's been described by these other speakers?
No, I did not. Perhaps different in some aspects because we were all in different departments. I was not in the psychology department, nor was I in the engineering department. I was a sociology major. The things that they talked about were things that were very common in our department as well. And when I say they were similar, I meant that we did not have the challenges that I expected when I went to the university. I did not feel that we were involved enough in the community in which we lived. And when I say lived, we were students there, so we were parts of the Scotlandville community. The community was deplorable in many instances. There were pockets of prosperity, but there were more pockets of stark poverty. And I felt that if we were an institution of higher learning, particularly an HBCU, then we should have been involved at every level possible, not just in agriculture and in engineering. And I still feel that to this day. When I went to Southern University, I went with the idea that this was going to be a phenomenal opportunity for me. I could almost walk to LSU from my home. In fact, I did walk to LSU from time to time. But there were two different worlds. If I tried to complete a project at Southern University by one of my able instructors, I couldn't do that on Southern University's campus because I couldn't do it with just a pencil and pen, and well, we didn't even have calculators at that time. You were doing math in a different way. But you typically had to use journals and books. I attempted to do that at Southern University's campus about twice. Each time, either the book wasn't there because it was on loan to somebody else, and I said it because there may have only been one, or the pages weren't there because some student who didn't have enough time to finish their work there decided to take it home. That's the reality. I figured my parents paid the same taxes that anybody else paid, so I went to LSU's library. And the first time I did that was quite an awakening. Not only did they have the books that I needed, but they had plenty of them. Our dormitories were showing signs of wear and tear before the end of the first year. That dormitory opened with my class. And before I finished my freshman year, the tiles were already wearing. So because of the time limit, I will end. But yeah, there were differences but many similarities, and I was in that fight. Thank you.
Ms. McDonald, I would like you to take the next question because you were also a student in the 1970s who was not directly involved in this movement. But you did witness this tragic event. So what I want you to describe is the aftermath of this. Tell us about the rest of the day and the years after. How were you and other witnesses impacted by this tragedy?
Well, on that particular day, I was in the academic building, which is located on the back part of the campus. Next to it is the administration building. Next to it was the M.L. Harvey Chapel. I was on the second floor in my social work class. There I was at the window, seated by the window, and all of a sudden I saw students come into the administration building. Shortly thereafter, the instructor said, all students leave the building. We exited the building. As we left the building, the street that runs perpendicular to the bluff that takes you to the new administration building, that's where I stood. I saw the students in front of the administration building. It was a distance away. I could not hear what it was that they were saying. But I stood there out of curiosity because I wanted to know what was going on. I was in the movement. When they said dismiss class, get out of your class, go to the old men's gym, the new men's gym, which was Clifton Seymour's gym, or the old gym, that's where we conjugated. I remember Fred, I remember Charlene, I remember Ricky, I remember all of them, and I was there. As I stood on that corner, and all of a sudden saw this armory of military troopers, SWAT people, coming up there like they were getting ready to fight a war. I was like, Lord have mercy, what is getting ready to go on? It was a group of us that were right there on that corner. And then all of a sudden, tear gas came across us, overwhelmed us, overpowered us. We stood as long as we could, and then we started coughing, and it was a very, very traumatic experience. And then after that, we had to run. We ran. My car happened to be parked over by James Blaine Moore Engineering Building. But one thing that I could say, the brothers helped us as sisters because we were weak, we were torn, we didn't know what was going on. I finally made it to my car. When I did get to my car, the two brothers that helped me, they said, Maida, are you able to drive? I said, I'm gonna pray for a minute outside of crying. I was able to get in my car, I was able to go over the hump, got to the red light at Harding Boulevard, Scenic Highway, boom, bulletin. 2 Southern University students have been killed. I made it home. When I got home, I went to my daddy, I fell on my knees, I cried. I was just hurt after finding why were they killed? What was the purpose of them being killed? Thereafter, we were told that the university was going to be shut down. It was shut down. We had to get all our coursework requirements from our instructors. The university was closed for that semester. We did not have to return to school, but the question again was why? So I do want to say thank you, Professor Bell, thank you, Brittany, and I also want to say Attorney Dr. Johnny A. Jones Sr., who fought for this cause. My papi, who was known throughout the entire United States of America, I know he is shouting hallelujah because he wanted this to be where it is today. So thank you much for having me.
And so my next question is to Mr. Patrick Robinson. His free name is Leonard. And I don't want anyone to leave here today thinking that he's carrying this stick for attention. This stick that he carried, he's told me the significance about it several times. So I really want him to explain to everyone here the significance of the stick that he has.
The significance of the stick is that when we were allowed to come back to Southern in January of the following year, 1973, there was Smith Brown Memorial, I think the first one, on Southern's campus. On Southern's campus. And the thing that happened was that we had a coffin that we had made up, Students United Remnant, and we decided to try to take the coffin into the Smith Brown Memorial that was being held in the gymnasium that's behind the new administration building. So we went to the first door and weren't able to get through, so we started toward the next door, and the campus police snatched it out of hands and smashed it to pieces, and this is all that remains of that coffin. That's the coffin story. I'm a self-appointed historian. So, how much time do I have left? A minute? Okay, well, let me try to do this, because I gotta do it. I gotta do my thing. I'm a historian. Okay. Henry Kissinger of the Nixon administration gave the directive to stop at all costs radicals, militants, etc. They must not have a single victory or society will break down. In other words, the status quo will break down. 1968, Orangeburg, South Carolina State College. 3 18-year-old students were killed, buckshot in the back, fired by police. 1970, Kent State, 4 white students were killed by the National Guard. 1971, Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi, 2 students were killed at a dormitory by police. 1972, Southern University, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Smith and Brown were killed by buckshot to the head fired by police. An article in the Advocate newspaper at the time described us as militants, which means warlike people. We were peaceful and law-abiding. The U.S. Constitution gives us all the right to free speech and freedom of assembly. Police allegedly were told that we held Netterville hostage in the administration building after he told us to wait for his return just before he left the building. How could we hold him hostage if he wasn't even there? Because we were mislabeled militants, we had to be stopped at all costs. That cost included the lives of Smith and Brown. Thank you.
I now would like to hear from Judge Don Johnson. He was also a student in the 1970s, but he was not involved in the student movement. You, Judge Johnson, have spent a lifetime in Baton Rouge. How did this tragedy impact the Baton Rouge community in 1972 and beyond?
I'm going to read a short statement. I was a freshman student on the tragic day in '72. My twin and I were there. All the chaos erupted and I could not find him. When I arrived home, my mom asked, "Where's your brother?" I had no answer. I had no answer. So later on, I came home and he was back there when it happened. Largely, we were all traumatized. I was more of a energized bystander, witnessing the episodic migration of mostly senior and junior level students. And I was interested in following along this excitement. So the question that I'm asked to answer is, how has the event impacted our community in these 50 years? And what happens next? This tragedy 50 years ago had a profound impact on our community because we were not a community. We were separate and apart. We were separate and unequal. That was the state of affairs in '72. So, like every other massive protest and confrontational event, social change in Baton Rouge has several examples that inform us of the ways that we live in our community today. First, let's talk about the Black community. The Black community, particularly our students that attended higher education, and in the few high schools that we attended, we inherited a legacy of social and student-led courage. And as students, we were directly, adversely impacted by the circumstances that placed upon us unearned suffering. Unearned suffering. And we accepted that responsibility. Felt that our obligation was to redeem us from this unearned suffering. So we acquired resistance in our attitude. We acquired resistance in respectful disobedience. We acquired a way to believe that we could destroy unfair treatment by our state and our leaders. So we urged them and called them to duty to help us challenge the existence of the status quo and bring forth lessons learned long ago. So we challenged and we fought, and particularly another impact was that our parents were twisted and torn. On the one hand, they were concerned about our safety. On the other hand, they patted us on the back. Some of them remained solid because of fear and circumstance and the ability to control and regulate their behavior as well as to destroy their jobs and the opportunity to provide for us. So our parents were betwixt and between. But nonetheless, they sung songs and hymns, and we struggled on. So the black community demanded, as a consequence, greater reality in the preamble words of our independence in our Constitution. So we brought meaning to the word of liberty and equality and equal treatment before the law. These students who attended Southern and the impact of our foundational treatment that day led us toward an independent administration, led us toward leadership of our own institutions, and consequently, the whole community was affected. How do you say it was impacted? Well, let me give you another example of how the larger community of Baton Rouge was impacted. The black and white university systems largely advocated for the continued existence of Southern University. There were some who wanted to eliminate institutions of higher education for minorities. There were some who called for alignment and joining with the campus that was south of us. Nonetheless, the consensus arrangement was that we would provide for the improvement and the maintenance of Southern University, while at the same time we would institutionally, via de jure methods, establish the free man's generational march toward freedom of educational independence, while at the same time preserving and replacing LSU's de facto system as the state's flagship university. In other words, we ignited the spirit of an equality in our institutional arrangement and administration and control of our destinies. I'll conclude with this. Notwithstanding any law or legal formality to recognize you, to hold anyone accountable or responsible, or to correct this tragedy for these surviving families, the fall of '72 tragic impact has without a doubt, has not and will not conclude without us establishing a new foundational value in the hearts of 50 years of us who were there, who were bystanders, and who followed this legacy. And I'll say it in this way. They that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places. Thou shalt raise up the foundations of many generations, and thou shalt be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths to dwell in. These are the students who are the repairers of the breach and the restorer of our community. That is the legacy of the '72 impact. Thank you.
And the last panelist is Attorney Willie Sanders, and he'll bring all of this together for us. Mr. Sanders in 1968 was 67. I keep getting that wrong. In 1967, he was involved in the Grambling State University demonstration, and today he is a respected attorney. When you look back on the actions of the students during the 60s and the 70s, what lessons can be learned about the First Amendment?
Thank you, Brittany. First, I'd like to acknowledge the Smith and Brown family. I'd like to acknowledge Professor Bell and yourself and other students who put this together. And the fact that the governor showed up shows how important this is. And this will be a note in the history books forever. American democracy is an ever-changing experiment that has been tested since 1789. It has had its problems from day one, but peaceful protesters have helped make it better. In order to appreciate the importance of the First Amendment, Ricky, I normally refer my Loyola and Xavier students when I taught school law, I refer them to the preamble to the U.S. Constitution. I refer them to the preamble to the U.S. Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty and to ourselves and our posterity. We do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. But in order to form a more perfect union, in order to establish justice, in order to provide for the common defense, we've had to protest over the years, several hundred years. It doesn't happen automatically. So in order to fulfill that promise, then we look at the First Amendment. And the First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech, as you've heard tonight, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. You put the preamble together with the First Amendment, and that's a place where protesters have fit in for a few hundred years, and we will always have to challenge things to make America a better place. Student protesters, black and white, have sacrificed college jobs, good jobs, and sometimes their lives to establish justice and equal educational opportunities. The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution gives every American freedom of speech, the press, the right to peacefully petition the government for grievances. Our Grambling protest was peaceful, but taking over the campus building, well, perhaps we went a step too far. However, the building was empty, and it was early in the morning, 7 o'clock. Given America's challenges, protests were necessary to correct inequality and injustice. I said it was necessary to correct those things, inequality and injustice, as written in the Constitution. From slavery to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, those amendments, after the Civil War, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment defined who a citizen was in America. We were not citizens. Blacks were not citizens. We were considered 3/5 of a person only for representation and counting purposes. And then the 15th Amendment gave black men the right to vote, the recently enfranchised slaves the right to vote, but not women. Not black women, not white women. That took the 19th Amendment for women to vote. That was in 1920. Look at America. But for the protesters, where would women be? But for the protesters, where would children be in America? That's why that's why those things come together. That's what America is all about. And the First Amendment, Brittany, gives us that right. First Amendment gives us that duty. The First Amendment gives us that responsibility. It's serious. From the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to the Fair Pay Act of 2021, protesters have established justice and moved America toward a more perfect union. From the death of Dr. Martin Luther King, President John Kennedy, the Freedom Riders, lunch counter sit-ins, protesters helped establish justice. And as I've written in my own book called 67 Days in 67, we need to speak our own truth. History will show what we've done, but sometimes we have to show it and tell it ourselves. We need more than Black History Month, which is only one day of the month for 1 hour of that day with the same old program, same old songs, same old I have a dream, same old we shall overcome. I look forward to the day when I say, I have achieved my dreams. I look forward to the day when I can say, we have overcome and our people have overcome. That's what this protest is all about. Thank you.
To all of our panelists, and I also want to thank them for just trusting me with their stories and allowing me to bring forth this truth that all of you have heard today. Thank you.
Brittany, please. I'd like to, let me just say, since I have the mic, it's still up, it's still hot. Would you guys please, I know you all know how to Google, please Google the William Gus Commission report. The Attorney General of Louisiana at that time was William Gus. The governor commissioned him to investigate. He investigated. Go read his report, and you'll find a lot of the lies that were told about us have been debunked.
Panel members, I want to make sure the panel members remain. We're going to have a song, excuse me, and then we'll be able to ask you questions, so we need to stay.
Before we move on, I'd just like to say one thing that I did not interject. November 16th is always embedded in my spirit. I have never forgotten that day. I will always remember that day. And I know if I feel the way that I feel, surely it has impacted the roots and the hearts of those family members that are here. Thank you.
50. That's why it's called episode 50, because every year on the 16th of November, it's another episode, anniversary for you. Leslie Chambers from the mayor's office here, and she has a presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I must say that as an alum of Southern University A&M College and an alum of Southern University Law Center, I am deeply overwhelmed to be in the presence of the heroes that I heard so much about. The heroes who established a legacy of not just simply excellence, because we hear that word so much now, but more so a legacy of hope. And something of pride to pass down from generation to generation. I didn't understand why I felt compelled to attend Southern University. Now I understand the spirit that you all left, the fighting spirit, the tenacity